Our story begins not at sea, but in the fraught corridors of power in Moscow and London in the spring of 1942, where Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov is pressuring Winston Churchill for a massive increase in aid, the Red Army bleeding and burning in a desperate struggle to halt the German advance, their survival dependent on the tanks, aircraft, trucks, and ammunition that only America and Britain could provide. This political pressure crystallizes into a military operation of staggering risk, the Arctic convoy route, a hellish passage above the Arctic Circle where sailors faced a cruel duality of threats, the ever-present, bone-shattering cold that could freeze a man to death in minutes, and the man-made terror of German airfields and U-boat pens dug into the coastline of occupied Norway, a route so perilous it was dubbed the Suicide Run. Into this arena sails Convoy PQ-17 in late June 1942, a seemingly hopeful armada of 35 cargo ships flying the flags of America, Britain, Panama, and even the Soviet Union, their holds crammed with 594 tanks, 297 aircraft, 4,246 trucks, and enough ammunition and supplies to change the course of a major battle. Their precious cargo protected by a layered shield of warships including destroyers, corvettes, armed trawlers, and even 2 anti-aircraft ships, all under the distant, overarching threat of the German battleship Tirpitz, a 42,000-ton monster whose very existence tied down the entire British home fleet. The narrative builds a sense of impending dread by contrasting the initial, tense but manageable voyage, the first skirmishes with German reconnaissance, planes and U-boats that were driven off by the vigilant escorts, with the growing anxiety in the British Admiralty in London, where First Sea Lord Sir Dudley Pound, ailing and under immense pressure, became consumed by the phantom of the Tirpitz, a fear so potent it would override the reality on the water. The catastrophic turning point, the hook that will seize the audience, arrives on the afternoon of July 4th, 1942, when a cascade of misleading intelligence reports convinces Pound that the Tirpitz and her battle group have finally sortied to intercept the convoy, a conclusion based on fragments and fear, leading him to make one of the most controversial decisions in naval history. The first signal, cruiser force withdraw to westward at high speed, causes confusion and concern among the escort commanders. But it is the second follow-up signal, immediate, and the third earth-shattering command, convoy is to scatter, that plunges the operation into chaos and horror. An order based on the flawed logic that dispersal was the only hope against an attacking battleship, but which in reality delivered the merchant ships, now alone and slow, directly into the waiting jaws of the U-boats and the Luftwaffe. We then immerse the viewer in the visceral, human tragedy of the scattering, capturing the stunned disbelief, the raw fear, and the furious anger aboard the merchant ships as their protective warships vanish over the horizon, leaving each captain to play a solitary, deadly game of cat and mouse across hundreds of miles of open, icy ocean. The documentary now slows to chronicle the methodical, week-long hunt, following the fates of individual vessels like the SS Carleton, one of the first to be sunk, its crew spilling into the lethal water, and the SS Troubadour, which survived a torpedo hit only through incredible damage control, its crew battling fire and flooding for days. We witnessed the particular agony of the rescue ship Zamalek, which could only watch helplessly as ships it had just left were bombed and sunk, and the grim fate of the SS Paulus Potter, found days later by the Germans, drifting and abandoned, a ghost ship whose crew had vanished into the ice after abandoning her. The scale of the slaughter becomes appallingly clear. U-boats like U-255 and U-376 patrolling with impunity, surfacing to shell lifeboats, while squadrons of Heinkel 111 and Junkers Ju-88 bombers swooped down on defenseless targets, turning the Barents Sea into a sprawling graveyard of burning oil, shattered timber, and floating corpses. The aftermath is presented with stark, devastating clarity. Of the 35 ships that sailed, only 11 limped into the remote Russian ports of Archangel and Murmansk, their holds largely empty. 153 merchant sailors perished, and over 100,000 tons of cargo, including 3,350 vehicles and 210 aircraft, were lost. A strategic blow that forced the suspension of the Arctic convoys for the critical summer months and provoked a furious response from Stalin, who saw it as proof of Allied half-heartedness. The final act of the film delves into the long shadow of PQ-17, beginning with the immediate hushed-up inquiry that placed the blame squarely on the ailing Sir Dudley Pound, who would die the following year, his reputation forever tarnished, and exploring the deep, lasting trauma of the survivors, the forgotten men who carried the psychological scars of abandonment for the rest of their lives, their story suppressed by wartime secrecy. The documentary concludes by bringing the narrative into the modern day, with the recent discoveries of the wreckage of PQ-17 on the seafloor by marine archaeologists, their cameras capturing the eerie, preserved remains of Sherman tanks, Hawker Hurricanes, and railway locomotives lying where they fell, silent witnesses to one of the most tragic chapters of the war, a somber reminder of the brutal cost of global conflict and the profound human consequences of a single, catastrophic decision made in a room far from the storm and the ice.